Chapter 3 The Boiling Point. The group moves to the master bedroom, all looking a bit more concerned, as waves forcefully batter the downstairs walls. Sustained powerful gusts shriek like banshees, lashing and shaking the house, and streams of rain rattle and shake the storm shutters. The constant roar resembles the sound of an engine powering the entire gale. Karen has always heard that tornadoes sound like trains rolling through, and she feels that the roar overhead must resemble it. Tornadoes, however, only last a few minutes. This roar just keeps strengthening and continues incessantly. They all do healthy shots of goslings, the candles casting their shadows across the walls, making the whole scene appear ceremonial. They continue the chat from earlier before Bob inadvertently takes the conversation down a political direction as they talk about all the things they need to do tomorrow. Well, it sure is good we have organizations like FEMA that'll be here tomorrow to help us out. Bullshit, Joe states forcefully, the effects of alcohol in full effect. It's not like FEMA will do anything after this, just more government corruption, especially since the real president isn't in there. At least our governor is here to help. Oh, please, real president? Bob quotes him mockingly, the alcohol also rendering it more difficult for him to maintain his civility. You really think the election was rigged? Yeah, and you probably think Russia rigged 2016, Joe spars back. The only way to explain how such a great candidate as Hillary could have lost, he states sarcastically. Bob sits up and pauses for a moment, acknowledging, I knew all along Hillary was a terrible candidate. Hillary was the worst candidate ever, Joe interrupts him, and Trump was speaking a different language. Yeah, like saying drain the swamp? Bob retorts sardonically, taking back the metaphorical conch, the increasing intensity of the conversation leading Karen and Patty to tense a bit, especially as each new gust and wave batters the house. How'd that work out for you? It's like he drained the swamp and put all the creatures he found at the bottom in his cabinet. Barr, Pompeo, Bannon. Are you complaining about the economy under Trump? Joe, completely avoiding Bob's point, challenges him with a look of disbelief. No, Bob responds equivocally. If you invested in that market at all, Joe remains on the economy topic, you must have done pretty damn well while he was in, especially after the COVID crash. The market isn't everything, Bob qualifies Joe's assertion, not seeming to care that Joe had changed the topic, Karen wishing the woman could speak. Plus, you know it was artificial. They used the Trump tax cuts for stock buybacks. Did you make money off of Trump's market? Joe grills Bob, with Bob begrudgingly nodding. If you have such a problem with him on principle, you should give away that money on principle, right? Shouldn't you see it as blood money or something? Karen looks to Bob, who appears not to know what to say, knowing he cannot fathom just giving away money he has made on the market, especially what he made off of Amazon, Netflix, Moderna, and Pfizer in 2020. Now it is Bob's turn to avoid Joe's point. Well, at least Biden has brought civility and decency back to the White House. The rest of the world respects us again. Decency? Joe exclaims, unable to contain himself. Biden doesn't know the meaning of the word. The man's a puppet, Bob. Been corrupt his whole career. Senator from MBNA? That's not true. Trump at least had the guts to stand up for what he believed in, unlike Sleepy Joe who can barely finish a sentence. It's starting to look like elder abuse having him speak anymore. Oh, like Trump stood up for what he believed in during the pandemic? Bob reposts with a different point. Remember how Trump downplayed the virus, told people to drink bleach? How many lives could have been saved if he'd taken it seriously from the start? In the spirit of not addressing one another's points, Joe counters, oh, and you probably thought Kamala was right to say she would question any vaccine produced by the Trump administration, only to turn around and advocate for vaccine mandates when she was VP? Like Democrats weren't vaccine hesitant under Trump. That's before the vax even came out. Dems were still saying they wouldn't trust a Trump-produced vaccine. And they were right. So, why doesn't our side have a right to protest? Why is your side the only one with that right? Joe questions Bob, pointing to one of the many double standards floating around American politics and American life in general. Because your side does nothing but spew misinformation, Bob forcefully asserts. Let's just face it, Karen jumps in, itching to answer his question and get something off her chest. Your side is just racist. Racist? Patty laughs, finally joining. We voted for Obama in 08. This disclosure confuses Karen and Bob and leads them to quiet for a moment to let the information sink in. They may have voted for Obama, but that doesn't mean they're not racist, Karen thinks as a response, though does not voice it, not wanting to push this issue any further. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of racists who support Trump, Patty then qualifies, breaking the silence. You think? Karen states aggressively. How could there not be with all the dog whistling? What dog whistling? Patty queries seriously, as Bob and Karen give shocked looks to one another. What the hell happened? Bob now interrogates Patty, still amazed that they had voted for Obama, posing in disbelief. How could you go from voting for Obama to voting for Trump? Obama only gave us pocket change, bailed out Wall Street, not Main Street, and expanded the war on terror, Joe answers for Patty. He talked a good game, but that is all he was, talk. Bob and Karen both laugh loudly. Just talk? Bob asks rhetorically in disbelief. How many times has Trump uttered confirmed lies? And he dropped the Moab in Afghanistan as part of the war on terror? Karen cannot believe Joe would rave about Trump's market and not Obama's, or say that Trump has a better foreign policy than Obama, and cross-examines him. Okay, so you see Obama as a fraud, but you see Trump as some sort of savior? Yes, he's the only person with a clear plan, Joe affirms plainly and reflexively to Karen before changing the subject again and attempting to take back the reins. And you think the Dems aren't merchants of disinformation? Tell me what Biden has lied about, Bob challenges him, taking his bait. Do you even remember 88? Joe flings back, Bob quieting once again, aware of Biden's extensive history of plagiarism that caused him to drop out in 1998. That's so long ago, Bob eventually utters. Trump is lying now. Okay, let's look at Ukraine then, Joe cites another example. What about it? Bob challenges. Putin's a madman who wants to recreate the USSR. Oh, so Biden involved us to keep the world safe, Joe sneers. The war in Ukraine is a fight for democracy around the world, Bob affirms his position. Joe laughs haughtily and derides him. Did MSNBC tell you to say that? As if Fox doesn't feed you everything you're saying, Bob immediately fires back. Karen, insulted that Joe would think that they do not think for themselves, thinks the exact same thing herself. The storm has become a backdrop for their ideological furor, the tempest outside seemingly mirroring the emotional squall within the bedroom and fueling its intensity. Banging and crashing occur downstairs, and some light lets up the staircase, but no one wants to check. Karen and Patty out of fear, and Joe and Bob out of a desire to continue driving their points down one another's throats. The whole Ukraine thing with Biden is shady as shit, Joe continues after a brief silence. Hunter gets a job on the board of a Ukrainian gas company while Joe is VP handling Ukrainian policy. It's blatant corruption, and you know it. Misinformation, Bob objects, believing those details to be just that. Hunter's cushy job at Burisma, Joe will not cease amidst Bob's exhortations, making $80,000 a month with zero experience, giving a certain percentage to the big guy, and we cannot forget about his amazing artwork selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, fetching the same kind of money as small Picassos. What are you talking about? Bob questions in a challenging manner, as if it is all bull, although neither he nor Karen do indeed know about any of this. You think people pay that kind of money because his paintings are so good? Joe clearly will not change the topic unless Bob intervenes. How much would you pay for an original Hunter Biden? Will you let me speak? Bob attempts to assert himself back into this now one-sided conversation. Hunter Biden isn't the president, Joe. Joe, having none of it, continues to force his point. Yeah, well, President Biden, while he was senator, authored the crime bill that put many people in prison, rightfully, if you ask me, especially for crack, all at the same time his own son was addicted to it. Hunter even films himself smoking crack. The hypocrisy is unbelievable, Bob. Trump's family isn't exactly clean either. Bob finally gets a foothold, employing a little whataboutism. Ivanka and Jared made millions while supposedly serving the public. He let Jared, a lifelong family friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, take over his entire Middle East foreign policy, which included staying in Syria for the oil and presenting a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that only benefited Israel and multinational corporations. Biden's focusing on policies to help everyday Americans, not lining his pockets. Oh, come on, Bob. Biden was VP when Syria began. Joe attempts to detract from Bob's statement. Bob now tries to get Joe on the ropes. You really want to talk about corruption, Joe? Trump refused to release his tax returns, had numerous conflicts of interest, hosted many taxpayer-funded events at Mar-a-Lago, tried to pressure Ukraine to dig up dirt on Biden, pretended to be Christian to pander to evangelicals. Joe exhortingly attempts to rebut, but Bob does not relent, exclaiming, "Let me finish," to everyone's surprise, before professing he made the CEO of ExxonMobil his Secretary of State so that Exxon could finish its biggest contract ever with Russia of all places, made the CEO of Carl's Jr. the Secretary of Labor. He even admitted to using corruption in his favor in his debate with Hillary, saying he had bought her off or something like that. So many examples of corruption. He was just doing what was good for business. Joe calmly continues to defend Trump. Too much regulation is one of the things killing this economy. That's some good old boy bullshit, Karen jeers, unable to contain herself at Joe's willingness to overlook Trump's corruption, but not Biden's. Using the office to enrich corporations is not what the office is for. As if Democrats don't do that, Joe now employs his own whataboutism. Even if they do, at least they're not transparent about it, Bob retorts. Plus, the man was impeached twice. It was all a political witch hunt. Joe strikes back to the annoyance of Karen and Bob. And Biden's got the media covering up for him like no president ever, even more than Obama. Biden hides behind a facade of respectability while he and his family use his position to profit. At least he has a facade, Karen replies. Trump is just so crass and such a bully, all the scapegoating of illegal immigrants and Muslims, and grab him by the pussy. You really felt okay voting for that, Patty? She questions her, looking to point out one of Trump's worst qualities that really disgusts her. Joe and Bob back off for a moment and peer heatedly at Patty, both seeming to attempt to will her to answer his way. Honestly, it made me uncomfortable, Patty reveals, looking at her hands on her lap, leading Bob to perk up and Joe to scowl. But I'd rather a crass asshole who's transparent over some corrupt prick hiding behind a facade, she concludes, appearing to look at Joe for approval, leading the men's faces to invert their expressions rapidly. Transparent, Bob hurls back with amazement, causing Patty to recoil a bit. Again, he refused to file tax returns, paid hush money to a porn star. Who knows the things he did with the mob in the 80s? Need I go on? And what about the things Trump says? Joe tries to regain control, referring to Karen's point. Biden gets accused of sexual assault and everyone comes down on the accuser. So you're all about taking women seriously unless your guy's accused? Is that right? Like Trump doesn't have women accusing him, Bob comments. At least Biden doesn't have a history with Epstein. As if Clinton and Gates don't, Joe strikes back. Hell, Clinton said he was only on the Lolita Express 4 times when the flight logs say 24. How does he misremember by a factor of 6? Well, Clinton's not Biden, and at least Biden stands for a woman's right to choose, Bob yells back in response. Will you kids quiet down in there? They all hear a voice from outside the room. You sound like the people on TV, never addressing anyone's points or looking up what's right or wrong. You're all the same kind of people. You just believe different things. Same form, different content, and nothing but disrespect. Her father remarks lucidly, to everyone's amazement, before inquiring, Do you see what's happening here? Pointing to the water more than halfway up the staircase at this point. The banging they ignored earlier was the storm surge breaching the Rachel's defenses, the waves and current now strong enough to collapse the storm's shutters and sliding glass doors in the living room and her father's room, completely inundating the first floor. Amid their collective silence, the winds howl, and rain fiercely pelts against the windows. I think it's time, her father utters calmly and confidently, referring to his final request from earlier before shuffling back to the guest room. What the hell are we talking about? Joe asks, the gravity of the situation appearing to hit everyone and make them look sympathetically at one another. This storm is clearly really bad, and we're here fighting about politics? Bob finally agrees with Joe, looking over at him with an apologetic expression. I was thinking while listening, man, if anything any of you said about them is true, they're both corrupt pieces of shit. And their kids, Patty concludes, now appearing comfortable enough to speak freely. It's actually pretty sad that they were the best that this country could offer. Joe and Bob both give blank stares, as if not even having heard what she said. You're probably right, Karen agrees in the spirit of respecting her father, though still feeling pretty confident that Biden is just fine. Anyway, we should help Dad. Bob then ends the conversation, rising, inebriation and his discomfort at being about to nail his father-in-law into a coffin both apparent.